So, welcome to another episode of Men Able Matters. Wow, am I excited about today's episode because I'm joined by a guest who I've connected with on LinkedIn recently. And I think, although in age we are a little bit apart, we are very much in synergy and have a lot in common. This chap is actually leading the revolution in student well-being and is the founder of an organization called Student Breakthrough. He is a speaker, a trainer, a qualified teacher and a coach, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome to Men Able Matters, Sam Moinet. Sam, how are you?
Mate, great to be here, Steve. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited for today.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. Now, hopefully I did pronounce your surname right, didn't I?
Moinet. Yeah,
Moinet. Oh,
we'll
wow.
give
That's
you a
easy.
we'll give you a 5 out of 10, but it's better than most people. So good job.
Well, probably the same as me. I have to spell my surname every time I speak to anyone on the phone or when I go anywhere. So it's
Yeah,
possibly the same for you, I'm guessing.
yeah,
So, Sam, do me a big favor in Men Able fashion. Could you introduce yourself? Tell us who you are, where you're from, and what you do. And if you want to make all that last about 20 minutes, that'd be brilliant.
cool. Yeah, I can do, but I'll give you the succinct version. My name's Sam Moinet. I'm 29. I live in Cambridge, but
Hmm.
born and bred in Milton Keynes. In a nutshell, I help young people overcome anxiety and grow in confidence without doing loads of extra work or loads of extra like counselling or anything like that.
Hmm.
What we offer is really positive, present, focused, and we get results for young people through coaching.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. Now, I didn't realize that you grew up in Milton Keynes because I'm actually in Milton Keynes. It's where I've lived for 30 odd years.
Yeah,
So,
no, I moved, yeah, born and bred, moved all around. I love Milton Keynes. It was great for me. I still have loads of good connections there.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I met a girl. She lives in Cambridge, so here we are.
I will say no more. I think we understand. We
Yeah,
understand.
yeah, yeah.
So, Sam, take us back a little bit then, because there was a couple of things about your upbringing and childhood and school and stuff that you were telling us as sort of part of the journey towards where you're at now. Part of that as well was your dad was in the military. So perhaps you want to start with that and bring us up to date.
Yeah, cheers. I think you all know this. I think as boys, especially when we're growing up, we always look up to someone, and a lot of the time that is our dads and that father figure. For me at school, I wasn't very confident. I was really shy. I got picked on a little bit. Just never really found my feet at school, and I was a bit lost, if I'm honest, looking back. And I didn't really know what to do. But yeah, my dad was a Royal Marine commando. He fought in the Falklands War. Everyone in my family history was in the military to some extent. So I thought when I was 10 years old, I remember having this, like, I want to be like my dad. I want to have that confidence. I want to be a provider, be a in brackets man, right? Whatever that looks like. And that was my dream from that age to go and fight for my country. And I thought that would give me the awareness that I needed and the excitement that I needed. And I got to achieve my dream. And if you listen to this, and I want you to think of a time when you're at your best, right? So Steve, think of a time when you're at your very happiest. Up to that point in my life, this was that moment. And in 2012, I got accepted into the Royal Anglian Regiment, and they were going to sponsor me to go to Sandhurst. I ran up to my dad at 21 years old. I had tears of happiness coming down my face. And I ran up to him and I said, Dad, check this out. They want me in the Royal Anglians. And yeah, that moment, I really thought he's proud of me. He loved me. And it was an amazing moment.
Mm-hmm.
But 4 weeks later, I got a letter through the post. And Steve, I want you to imagine a time when you're at your worst, maybe when things weren't going so well. And yeah, I read the first line, and it said, Sam, unfortunately, you failed the medical exam because you've been diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And yeah, I still get a bit shaken up by it. Before now, it was such a horrible moment, and it really led me on to a couple of years of some really poor and low mental health.
Right. Right.
Up to that point, yeah.
Okay. So you were 21 at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know that Crohn's disease is debilitating as well, because my son actually is the same age as you, and he also has Crohn's disease. And we talked about that a little bit off camera. Give us just a few insights into the connection between that and the sort of mental health side of it then.
I think at that time I wasn't very clued up. When I was at school, I sound quite old saying that. When I was at school, but it was a fair time ago now. It's probably like 12, 15 years ago. there wasn't any support for mental health. I went to an all
Mm,
boys school for like 5 years as well, and it was so macho. And luckily, I was in the rugby team and the cricket team, and so I kind of found my feet there. But there wasn't much support. And when I got this news, I really basically bottled up like most guys do, because we're always told these lies, like that we have to be strong, we have to pull our socks up, we have to man up, we have to just tough it out, all this crap that we're
yeah,
told.
yeah.
Um, and really, I suppressed all my emotions, and I didn't know what to do after I got that news. But my mum was a teacher, so I fell into teaching, and this story kind of links because when I started my teaching career, I didn't want to be there. I felt like such like a victim. I felt so down and low that I remember teaching, right, and I literally teaching my year 11 class, and I want you to imagine a usual classroom, whiteboard, chairs at the back, but your teacher is like facing the board for a while, and I was facing the board because I was welling up. I was in such a low spot,
Wow, right.
and I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the connections to handle it really, and
Mm, mm,
I got so anxious, developed chronic insomnia. I'd rock into school in like an hour's sleep. I was broken,
yeah.
beyond broken at that point. I thought,
Okay. Now I know that one of the other things that we talked about as well was how you didn't have the best journey through school as well. And I know you're talking to students and schools a lot. So what are the sort of snippets of what happened to you in school then that drove where you're at as well at the moment?
it was mainly those years between, I'd say about like, so it's secondary, so about 11 years old to
Hmm.
16 years old. I was at this boys' school. I was just trying to be someone else. I wasn't the smartest kid. I wasn't the best at sports. I was constantly comparing myself to others and kind of wishing that was someone else. I wish I was better at sports. I wish I was, I don't know, had better looks. I wish I was better academically or whatever. And I just sort of beat myself up for years at school, really. I
Hmm.
never gave myself enough credit. And I think it was the environment I'm in. I know you've mentioned this sort of these macho environments that sometimes we find ourselves in. And a boys' school in the mid 2000s was a macho environment. There wasn't really any mental health support or anything like that. And it was very sort of toxic. You know, if you weren't the loudest or the best at sport, then you didn't really have. I think I struggled with an identity really.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
only when I left that school and went to a bigger sixth form college that I sort of found my feet a bit more, and I
Hmm.
found some friends, and I just felt more connected. But yeah, I was metaphorically like punching myself in the face at school all the time.
Why do you think that is such a tough time for kids of that age? And I mean, obviously, we're talking predominantly about boys and men, obviously, because that's where the angle we're coming from. I know that it's not exclusively boys and men, of course. Girls have a really tough time, but why is it that age group?
I think obviously there's loads of there's quite a few things to talk about. The first thing is obviously that at that age you haven't had any life experience. Like
Mm,
school is your life, give or take. The 1,000 people to 2,000 people are at that school as sort of your community, and you can't escape. So that's the first thing. There's no,
that's your only point of reference, isn't it?
well, yeah, like if I'm at a job, if I had a job
Mm,
and I was getting picked on or workplace bullying, I just tell my manager or leave. Do you know what I
mm,
mean?
mm,
But
mm.
at school, it's different. You're always around those people. So you've got that classic thing of that's been through the years, hundreds of years now, that you can't necessarily leave the system. Do you
Mm,
know what I mean? It's always there. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing, people feel that they need to be a certain way to get recognized
mm-hmm.
and not appreciate their own skills. Like I said, to be recognized, you usually have the class clown. You might have the class clown, the person that's good at sport, the joker, the badly behaved people. Everyone's trying to carve out an identity, but it might not be an identity that is suited to them. And then you couple on that, then you light the flame of social media with that as well, and you've got a bit of a cocktail for disaster, really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't have social media when I was at school. I don't think we even had computers actually. To be fair.
Chalk,
Um,
slate and chalk.
it wasn't quite that bad, but we're somewhere in between. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, the class clown thing. I mean, that was the strategy I adopted because I worked out fairly quickly that I wasn't the biggest in the class by any means, and the best way to stop yourself getting beaten up was to make other kids laugh.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
worked that out really quickly. So became the class clown, and then that just creates your own persona for the rest of your life in a way.
Yeah, we take on that identity, and I think lots of people, all our beliefs around the world are formed really early on, like before that time, like between the ages of 0 and 8. I always remember my dad really told me off. I was doing something quite bad at the time, but just like normal stuff. And he really told me off. And I remember that moment, I was really scared. I was about 7 years old. I was in the loft. It was dark and I was messing around, and he had a go at me, and probably rightly so to an extent.
Mm.
But after doing some work on myself, I realized that was probably the moment that I was like, right, I've got to make him proud. And how can I make him proud? Well, I'm not very confident. He was a soldier. Let's join the army. Right.
Right.
So I think like the work that you're doing on this show, and I encourage everyone to do some sort of inner work on themselves. It's not weakness. Like, you actually find out loads about yourself, and you feel this weight lifted off your shoulders. But the time is now to start that. Don't just put that off.
100%.
It's so important to do that inner work
Yeah.
from whatever age, right? What if you're 70, if you're 20, if you're 15, like whatever it is, the putting those solid foundations in, or removing stuff that's holding you back, is vital.
Well, this is why I was keen to talk to you, Sam, because as you know, this was born out of the traditional midlife crisis. The guys that have worked in the male-dominated sector all of their life, and they're 35, 45, 55, whatever, and suddenly things are falling apart. But was then the realization for me that no, actually, my story is that all of this began when I was kind of 15, 16, really, and just continually put a lid on it, put some sort of suppression on it. And then I think I said to you that I bumped into a group of lads in a park some weeks back, and we ended up having a bit of a chat over a park, socially distanced park bench. And they said that there's no support in the school they're in Milton Keynes, funnily enough. And we're not going to name and shame them, but there was no support in that school for boys, particularly who are having mental health issues. And every single one of them raised the stuff that you've talked about, and we threw in sexuality in there as well, and career aspirations and culture and everything. So what do you see as you go, and now you're doing this with students, where what support is out there?
Well, first, I love your story of just chatting to those guys. I love how that just happened. I think that's a really, really cool story. And they are
Oh, that
right.
was a definite moment of the universe
Yeah,
making that happen. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
definitely. And I think it's really, really cool. And yeah, I think you should maybe reflect on that. And I don't know if you've done a show on it yet or done a post on it. It'd be quite cool to reflect on what you
Oh
found.
yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, not a show on it, but I definitely did a post on it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, look, I'm not here. I was a teacher for 5 years, right? So I know the ins and outs. I know the struggles of teachers. I know the struggles of schools.
Yeah.
I'm not here to bash the current level of emotional support because let's be honest, there's limited funding, there's limited time.
Mm-hmm.
The support in school, the thing that does sort of grate me a little bit is the fact that schools do have money, they do have budget, but I don't think they spend it in the best way. So
Right.
traditionally, if you're feeling, and they use this phrase at school, I don't know why, but wobbly, I don't know what the hell that means. Does that mean anxious, depressed, whatever it means? I think we use that word as like this student's not feeling themselves. They go and speak to the school counsellor.
Well, that being the case, I went through an entire school just wobbling my way through it then.
I think I'm wobbly right now, Steve.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
It's like we use words sometimes to just describe loads of thinking, really.
Mm.
And you go and see the school counsellor, who stereotypically here is usually a little old dear that's been in school for 20 years. Might be like a drab sort of class. It's not all the case, by the way. This is just from what I've seen. And you'll go there, you'll talk about what's going on, and that's kind of it. Like maybe some tears, maybe some learning, but nothing really, no doing. And you might have other people like learning mentors or people to support in other ways, pastoral managers, pastoral leads. But it's not enough, and it's not the right type of support. I think lots of people see mental health support as it has to be scary, dark, intense, counseling, psychotherapy. And don't get me wrong, if you've been through bereavement, abuse, like trauma, like, you need this level of support. And I'm not a trained counselor. I'm not here to say that, but lots of students, lots of boys who are feeling underconfident, anxious, not motivated, they need something like this, right?
Yeah.
Student breakthrough that's positive. It gets them results, gets them action. It's relatable. It's fun. Now, that's the kind of support that a lot of kids need. They don't need this intense type of support, and also they need someone who's a bit, like I say, young and a bit of a role model as well.
Yeah, yeah, and relevant, absolutely, and relevant.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and that's what I was getting from these guys that I had the chat with, and and I think it's clearly never too early to start this stuff, and I've been inspired watching and seeing what the stuff that you're doing, because I think you're adding an amazing element of value over and above what great work teachers actually do as well. So.
Oh yeah, and teachers do an amazing job. Anyone who
Mm.
works in education, like, my hat goes off to goes off to you. Is the hat goes off to
No,
you?
I know what you mean.
I can't think of the phrase. But anyway, I tip my hat to you, right? Because you do an amazing job, and it's very, very high pressure, especially right now.
Mm, mm.
And there's lots of different things on, but that's why I train lots of teachers to use my coaching methods as well. Because if I can train more teachers, and I run lots of parent events as well, alongside it, then everyone, it's like a holistic view of the student changes. It's not just me working with the student. It's like, teachers got some coaching skills, parents got some coaching skills. I'm the coach, and they're all helping the student holistically.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the support is outdated. I don't think it's necessarily relevant, and I think they could spend their money better. But I also appreciate lots of schools are resistant to change.
Mm.
They're resistant to chucking money at stuff, and I understand that. So I do get the pressure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, at the other end of that, what we're dealing with in Men Able is an industry that has a culture of a lifetime of kind of scooping up these people that have not had these mental health issues addressed as a teenager or whatever, and now, we don't. I'm saying we have a lot, but there are issues coming to the fore of many adults who are now ready to sort of say, yeah, I've got or I've had issues and I need some help.
Well, I've run my first event, actually, was 2 years ago to the day in Milton Keynes.
Right.
Oh, it was 2 years ago to the day. Yeah, amazing. Anyway, at this event, there was a probably in his 50s, maybe early 60s year old bloke. And we did a really basic coaching tool just to get some awareness on where he was in his life, right? A little life coaching exercise. And he just broke down and cried. And I didn't mean for that to happen, by the way, because I did this tool when I was 21, 22. So I've done a lot of inner work on myself, but it was surprising for me to see a really basic tool of awareness can bring such an emotive result, because like you said, people squash it down, squash their stress, squash their worries, squash their anxieties, especially what it is to be a man,
Yeah.
down. And this was just a little kind of opening of the tap, really. But it really shocked me that he hasn't had that awareness for his whole life, and he's like 50 or 60.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, like, you've been carrying around all this. It's like, carrying a ball and chain around on your foot. I would rather live my life without a ball and chain on my foot. But lots of people we see invisibly dragging this stuff around with them, and they're either too ashamed, or they haven't got the strength or the courage to open up about it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is exactly where you and I are in the same place in terms of what we're talking about, because, if I could have had this conversation with myself when I was 17, certain things that have happened probably wouldn't have happened. And outside of that, certainly the way I think about things. And if you get a chance at some point, one of the other podcast guests I had was Joy Langley, whose son committed suicide at 23 a couple of years ago. And what she talks about now is what we make these things that happen, what we make them mean. And I think that for me would be a key lesson to somebody at the sort of age group that you're working with, is to say, look, don't make these things that happen to you mean something that then becomes that ball and chain, like that guy you described has got around his ankle.
Are you saying that it's sort of the pain we experience, don't let it hold you back? What are you just summarizing there? I'm just interested to sort of.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. It's funny enough, before we started recording, I was actually in the middle of sort of editing the podcast that I did with her yesterday. And obviously, the most painful thing that could happen to her was her son committing suicide.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should rephrase, taking his own life. We're not going to use that committing suicide, because that's a hangover from the days of when suicide was a criminal offence. So that's where we get the word committed from. But he took his own life. And what she talks about is that, all these things that happen to you during the course of your life, it's what you process them as and what you make them mean.
Hmm.
So she used an example of an analogy of her and I walking down the street, and we go to cross the road and a lorry comes hurtling down the street and just misses us. And, as a result, we throw ourselves back onto the pavement. My immediate thought is that it's actually ruined the brand new suit that I was wearing. Whereas her immediate thought is, well, I've been practicing my gymnastics. That just gave me an opportunity to practice a cartwheel that I wasn't expecting. Do you know what I mean? It's that difference between something's happened and there's two complete opposite ways of what do I make that mean?
Yeah, well, that's the big thing. I sort of, I say sort of, it's one of my key messages. One of my key talks that I give is why failure is a blessing,
Mm, mm,
and helping students to see from a young age that the failure and setbacks along their journey should be embraced, not suppressed. And actually, if
mm-hmm,
you engage with your failure, if you engage with your suffering, you grow faster. And if you
mm-hmm.
haven't read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, I recommend reading that book. It's all about growth mindset. But failure is an amazing thing, because if you think about it, it's a bit like having a bow and arrow. And when we fail, it almost pulls back the bowstring and it shoots us into, a different direction, wherever that's going to take us. And
Yeah, yeah.
helping students from a younger age, develop that is so important. Now, I know I mentioned 0 and 8, 0 and 9, our beliefs are formed around the world, but the teenage brain, isn't fully developed until, your early 20s. So you're still malleable at that time. So if you can instill these great habits and behaviors and actions at school, then it's going to build resilient adults. And that's actually one of my favorite quotes all time, which fires me up all the time, which is, yeah, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the quote that fires me up every day. It's an
Mm.
amazing, amazing phrase.
I think I actually saw that on one of your posts, and I think that might have been the thing that triggered me to go, yeah, we are definitely on the same page.
Oh, you drop
Um,
that in a networking meeting, everyone's like, oh, I know what he stands for.
no, 100%. Yeah,
Simple.
yeah. And so from the conversation you had with this guy that was clearly, carrying this ball and chain around, this 50, 60-year-old chap who broke down in one of your sessions, did you get as far as kind of working out where some of that came from, what he'd been suppressing or repressing?
I did, for the record, by the way, it wasn't like I didn't leave him with his pain, if that makes
No, no,
sense.
no. Yeah, yeah,
He
yeah.
was able to share. We talked about it a little bit, and the big thing out of the whole thing was, and that's why coaching is so great, because unlike the counseling, which I see is just, okay, have a chat, get it off your chest, which is still good.
Mm, mm,
Coaching is so action orientated. So I was able to help him set a couple of action steps that he can go away and work on, that he can control.
mm-hmm,
I think about speaking to an ex-partner, or I can't remember, it was a long time ago, but taking a positive step to do something to heal himself, to
mm-hmm.
gain forgiveness and acceptance on the situation. Which is why helping students do this is so important, because asking a 10-year-old after the session, what do you want to go away and work on this week? What do you want to do? That's the power, because they're told throughout their whole lives, and parents and teachers, do this, you should, by the way, a rubbish word to use. You should be doing this. You should be doing this. You should be doing this. That's also why we got so many problems with our mental health as guys, because we feel like we should be somewhere else.
100%. Yeah, yeah.
It's a rubbish word. But anyway,
And need as well as the other one. You should do
yeah,
this, or you need to. Hate that.
yeah, it's a rubbish word. And instead of that, it's like, well, what could you do this week? And
Mm,
asking a 10-year-old, well, I might put my hand up in class once because I'm feeling a bit underconfident. But that
mm-hmm,
came from him. That was never me telling him to do that. That's the power, like in coaching, and using this with kids instead of having a chat. Which, don't
mm,
get me wrong, talking is the first step, right? And listening to someone is also important. But I say there's always three things. What we do in coaching, it's the first thing has to be awareness. So awareness on the situation where you are. The second thing is action, what you're going to go away and do. And the last thing is holding yourself accountable. So what will be the impact on your life if you achieve that? Because awareness is great. Like coaching gives us all great awareness, but if you don't go away and do something, then, I'm trying to think, it's a bit like not putting petrol in a really nice car.
mm,
You're not
mm.
going to go anywhere, right? You need something to kickstart your engine. And that's why action's so good. And helping students set their own action is magical.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say in my talks to students. Great quote from Gandhi, which is happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are all in harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And showing students that, I always use in a talk, like, how many of you obviously said you're going to revise, or think you're going to revise, say to your parents you're going to revise, then you go away and binge Netflix. You just bored their hands, right? So they're out of alignment. And And I asked them, like, what would be the impact if you thought you were going to revise, said you revised, and you go away and actually do it?
Mm,
Because
mm,
they end up lying to themselves. And I'm trying to help students to build their personal integrity.
mm,
Also leadership. Leadership is not about being captain of the sports team, which I thought it was, or being head of house or something at school. It's actually just sticking to your word.
mm, mm.
Again, showing students that is vital.
Can I ask you something on the student front? I've done some work in the past with a couple of universities, and one thing that struck me, there's one particular university that specializes in law and business, and there was a lot of students that, and I was doing public speaking programs with them actually,
Nice.
and yeah, it was amazing and really inspirational, and but yet there were some students who wouldn't put themselves forward to come up to the front of the room and present. And I would say to them, well, firstly, one, it's a presentation skills module, so you were kind of expecting that might be involved. And two, you're going into law. So at some point, you're going to be stood up in court in front of some fairly senior, much older people, and you're going to have to speak in public, be it to 2 people or 100 people or whatever. And then what we got to was the crux of, well, actually, I don't really want to do law and business. I would rather do media studies or fashion. And so I'd say to them, well, why are you doing this course then? Oh, well, it was kind of expected from my family or my parents or culture or, my sister's a doctor, so therefore I've got to be a lawyer kind of thing. So
Yeah.
how do you help, how would you help students? What would be your tips for students to get their head round that?
Well, massive question. The first thing is obviously to think about the pressure that parents put on,
Mm.
and that expect, again, my expectation. My dad never told me to be a soldier, but
Hmm.
my own belief around it was I had to, which is mad, isn't it? Isn't that mad that he never actually sat me down and said I got to do that, but I thought I had to do it to make him
Yeah.
proud.
So that's the point, isn't it? So where did that belief come from if it was never drilled into you?
But that came from, like I said, that past experience, and I believe that moment where he really shouted at me, and I was 7 years old, I was in the loft, and I was scared, and I felt, and he left, and I was like, I had to go and do it in that moment.
Mm.
So it
Mm.
comes from childhood. It comes from basically wanting to make our parents proud of us. But
Mm.
then it kind of exaggerates, and all of a sudden you end up sat in a room and realizing you don't want to do law.
Yeah.
It's hard, and I think helping people to appreciate their own talents and what they want to do first. And I always say stuff, like stay in your lane, do what makes you happy.
Mm. Mm.
Doing exercises on like your strengths, on your passions, and the vision and the life you want to create is the first step.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you can kind of go backwards. But it's a revelation for some students when you say that. Don't worry about what mom and dad think. Do what you want to do. Step up
Mm.
into your power and stay in your lane, because you don't want to be that person 40 years old in a dead end job that they never wanted to be in from from when they were 18.
Yeah, yeah. Right, which brings us back round to the guy who was 50, 60, carrying that ball and chain. There's probably an element of that for him, wasn't there? That he's, ended up going down a safe or sensible route.
Yeah, massively so, and then ends up in pain and heartache and
Yeah,
regrets. And
yeah,
let's be honest, none of us want regrets, right? Like,
yeah.
no one wants to look back. I think that's one of our. I did quite dark here, but I did some research into like the top. There's an actual newspaper article, if you Google it, on like the top statements of the dying, or things that people say, and it's about. I think one of them was working too hard. Was one of them. I worked too
Mm.
hard. That's a
Mm-hmm.
massive regret of people that, and I think, to be fair, I might look back and say that as well. I want to have more fun, but we're in this mindset we have to hustle, we have to grind, we have to. I think it was working too hard, not forgiving myself and others, and also regretting some sort of decision in their life. But it's because when you actually start doing some inner work and like speaking about it, you can start forgiving yourself, accepting it, and letting it go. And
Yeah,
that ball and chain gets smaller, and eventually the chain just like flies off.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it takes time, and so many guys think strength and bravery is being a captain of a team, or joining the military, or speaking on stage, and whatever that is to you. But I'll tell you one thing, that's real bravery and strength and courage is talking
Mm.
and
Mm.
expressing yourself.
Mm.
That's true strength. And I think if we could flip that, even 50, not even 50-50, but give more weight to the second part, just expressing, all these suicides, all these mental health struggles for men would be massively reduced.
Yeah, yeah. Sam, that's brilliant. And this is again where I think we are, very much on the same hymn sheet. And what I'm getting loud and clear from you is that, yeah, I know you are working hard on what you're doing and stuff, but it's your purpose. It's your proper direction, isn't it? And I think when you live in that area of joy and abundance, it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, it's nice. I like putting that as well. The abundance word. I love
Mm.
that word. I've met a few student coaches who we have a Zoom call and they're like, "Oh, I think we might be competing against each other." And I'm like, "Look, there's no competition here. There's an abundance, right? There's an abundance of young people that need our help. There's no competition here.
Yeah.
We
And the
just
world keeps producing more, by the way. So
well, yeah, that's the positive, and also having this great, the internet and Zoom and all this stuff
Mm.
means that we can work with people from all across the world. But there is an abundance. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, yeah, I'll question you this: what is your definition of bravery and courage? And just sit with that. That
Mm.
would be a nice little question to ponder over.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had something happen to me recently, which is I found out that few people had become aware of some things that have happened in the past, and had immediately made judgments and taken a view that they didn't really want to be a part of my life anymore because of what they now know. And I immediately, a couple of months ago would have got angry about that, but I'm now thinking, no, I immediately forgive them.
Mm.
I forgive them that they don't have the ability to not be judgmental and so on about it. And so for me, that forgiveness is part of bravery and courage, I think.
Massively so.
Yeah.
Massively so. And there's lots of good ways to do some forgiveness. Writing a forgiveness letter is a great step. So forgiving
Mm,
yourself, forgiving others, saying what you love about yourself, apologizing for past events
mm,
is a great starting point. And then rereading that forgiveness letter. It was
mhm.
massive for me when I did that. I forgave my dad, basically. Not that he needed forgiving, by the way. Like, to an extent, he didn't do anything bad. Like, he's an amazing guy. He's still my number one role model. But yeah, just forgiving him was really important. And I actually went up to him at the end or afterwards. I said, "Look, Dad, this might mean anything to you," but I said this to his face, "But I forgive you and I love you." And he kind of didn't really understand, but we hugged, and that's all I needed.
Yeah, that's
Um,
amazing. I was going to ask you how it went when you said to your dad that you hadn't got into the army, because I mean, on the medical grounds, of course, that's slightly different, isn't it? But what was his view then?
I can't even remember. I was so emotional at that point. Like, my
Mm,
memories, all I really realized was that I was super anxious, down. I cried for days, drank and smoked for days.
mm,
I know that he's more proud of me. He doesn't. Does say it now and again, but I know that he's more proud of me for the work I've done here. And I had a guy who you should interview, by the way. His name is Jamie Uppington. And the day I met Jamie was literally probably this time last year.
mhm.
And I met him in Milton Keynes. His mum and dad had reached out to me, and Jamie sat down. And that morning, he tried to take his own life by jumping off a bridge in Milton Keynes.
Wow. Right.
I get quite, always get a bit emotional when I speak of
Yeah.
it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I get that. I get that.
So that was that moment. And we did a forgiveness letter then in that session.
Hmm.
He was in so much pain against himself and also the pain he's caused others.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a forgiveness letter. We cried together. I hugged him and I took him through our coaching program. And over the course of that, he wasn't going to school. He started going to school, built his confidence back up, started boxing, started eating better, training harder. And it culminated in February around an event in London. We had like 40 people in the audience. And Jamie got up and talked about his story and had
Wow.
the confidence at 15 years old to literally move this audience about his whole mental health journey and also the work with Student Breakthrough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just in the back, just sobbing like uncontrollably. And again, it was a magical moment. But again, let's say Jamie hadn't met me, and I'm not saying it could have been me, it could have been someone else. I'm not saying no, there's loads of other support out there and you've got to find the right support for you. But let's say me and Jamie didn't have that conversation on that day. What would happen? And I'm going back, my dad pulled me aside after the event. He came for the first time, by the way. I never wanted my parents at my events for a while. I came to that one. And he said, he looked me dead in the eyes and he said, if the business fails tomorrow, it's been a massive success because of this one person you've helped.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a really, really beautiful thing for him to say. And actually reflecting on it now is really, really cool.
So now that's given me a cold shiver because, I'm guessing I'm not a dissimilar age to your dad. I've got a son who's the same age as you. We talked about that off camera.
Yeah.
So, immediately I was kind of there with that sentiment. I could have seen me as your dad sitting at the back of the room, and how my reaction would have been. And I'm totally with him on what he said.
Yeah, it was, and
He's
I
500% proud of you then, isn't he? There's no question.
yeah, and he always has been. Like, I could be doing anything, he'd be proud of me, but he's more proud of me for what I do, I think, with the mental health stuff. The army thing, I'm quite a sensitive guy. There were parts of it, like the man management, the organizational part, I'd be really good at. I don't think the necessarily the aggression needed or the obviously sensitivity. If not most people go to war these days, but that wasn't really for me. Looking back, it was just I was doing it for him. But he's more proud of me now than I think he ever could be.
Yeah, that's lovely. That's a lovely way to sort of wrap things up as well a little bit, I suppose. And just one thing I wanted to mention. You mentioned just then that you've had some interactions with coaches who've said to you that you're competing with them. My immediate thought when you said that was that the difference between you thinking in abundance, you have this kind of collaborative abundance mentality, and the difference between somebody who comes out with something like that is I think they're working from a position of ego, whereas you're working from a position of purpose. Would you go along with that, do you think?
Yeah, it's going from a position of short-term gains, maybe trying to make money from not obviously money's important, but the priority, no one's in this business to become a millionaire. They're in the business to help students and young people.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's sort of a scarcity mindset. You could be my next door neighbor and doing what I do, and that's cool. I'm still going to be really upfront and honest here. My ego would still be a bit like, I'm not like bulletproof. I'd still be a bit sort of, okay, that's all right. But here's the thing. There's no part of me that's going to give that like second thought or weight or my time, because I'm staying in my lane. I'm doing what I'm doing. And I want to be leading the revolution. I am leading the revolution in student wellbeing, I believe, slowly. Yeah. But I've only been doing it 2 years. So give me a couple more, I'll be all right.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, from where I'm sitting, Sam, you're doing an amazing job. And it was great connecting with you the other day. And we've had a couple of interactions on LinkedIn. And I think I get the impression you're feeling the same about what we're doing as well. So there's definitely a synergy there between us, I think.
Yeah, man, I love what you're doing here. And I love how it's, unfortunately, it always takes some pain to do this. And I had a chat with someone like, what would it look like if we didn't have pain to start these ideas? But it wouldn't give it the same weight and the same emphasis and the same credibility.
Yeah.
Who would I be to stand on stage or coach people if I hadn't gone through my own challenges and seen the benefits of it and X, Y, Z? You have to go through the pain to get the gain or get the result, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's up there with is it necessity is the mother of all invention, isn't it? And it's very similar, isn't it? You and I have gone through similar sorts of pain. You've clearly managed to sort of capture yours at a much younger age than I did. And that's what gives us now the empathy. You can see that in students and teenagers that you're working with, and I can see it in grown-ups who are now very much ensconced in the workplace, and some of them in senior management positions.
Yeah,
so I think between us, if we come at it from both angles, eventually we'll get there, won't we?
100%. But it's going to take time. But having these conversations and doing the great awareness that you're doing is gonna, and that's the biggest thing as well. That a great bit of advice I got given. If you go on my Instagram, you can see my first ever video, which is over 2 years ago, and I'm on there. I'm like, I'm absolutely terrified. But before that, I had a coaching session. Out of the coaching session I had was the awareness that if my video can help one person, then it's been a success.
Yeah.
If someone's listened to Men Able and only one person's listened to it, one person has been helped or saved or feels that they can talk, then it's been a success.
Yeah.
And I would encourage everyone if you've got an idea, if you've got something that can help someone, like don't keep that bottled up because you're doing the world a disservice. You've got to
Mhm.
step up and do it. Like, you didn't have to do this, but you felt compelled to follow through on it. Like, the wisdom hit you. You were like, I could do it. Like, and here we are.
Yeah.
And that's amazing and beautiful because you're helping so many other people. So if you listen to this and you've got the idea, like Steve's had, like I've had, then follow through on it. Step
Yeah.
up.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sam. Now, one quick question for you.
Yeah.
You're talking to a bunch of students. They're about to go off into the workplace, and they are going to go into an environment that's full of people my kind of age who perhaps haven't yet seen the light and aren't open and talking about this sort of stuff. What would be your tip for them to go off and, you know, play their part in the world without looking like they've got their pants on their outside of their trousers and they're a superhero?
That's a real tough question. I'm going to go for the biggest and the most underused skill of listening.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to go for. So many people listen to reply,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't listen to understand. And I think if you're a new person into the workplace, you can be very caught up in what other people think about you or perceive about you. But I'm going to be honest, if you just remove your own agenda and listen to someone to really understand them and ask a couple of maybe a follow-up question or something, then that's going to be a great building block to secure a relationship. Now, you obviously might say that people aren't going to be talking, or as much to a new person, but when they do, you got that golden time. Just get out your head into your heart and really listen with empathy and purpose and see what happens.
Yeah.
That'd be a
Yeah.
great starting point, I think.
Brilliant. Okay. That is a great starting point. That's also an amazing ending point. So, Sam Moinet, I pronounced your name properly
You
at the
got it right.
last.
Nice.
Thank you so much for joining me on Men Able Matters. I hope that you and I can have many more conversations. And you never know, one day in a world that's back to some sort of normality, me and you could end up on a stage together. How about that?
Or on a park bench having a beer, one of the two.
Hey, either works for me.
Nice, mate. Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.